Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to the Gotham and Beyond podcast. I am your host, Evil Dungeon Master Vince. Hopefully you're doing well out there. I know I am. Remember to go to gotham-database.com for my website, and you can go to Gotham Beyond on YouTube if you want to follow the audiograms there, or check us out on Spotify. Don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Appreciate all those people that already have done it. Anyway, today our topic is going to be talking about the module Project Prometheus as requested by user Dale Russell 5673. If you have suggestions or want to have something reviewed or talked about, drop us a line over on Spotify comments or YouTube comments. One of the two is going to get my attention, definitely for a response. So this is one of the earliest DC Hero adventure modules from Mayfair Games. This came out in 1985, and you can kind of feel it. It's from that 85 era. It's good in some ways, and it's also rough in other ways too. And this episode actually is going to go over exactly this module. I hadn't looked at this module in a while, and I remember like pieces of it, and when he suggested it, I was just like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember the Minotaur or the Mediterranean setting, the weird techno mythology angle. But sitting down and reading it over the last week or so, it reminded me of how experimental early DC heroes can actually be. This module is kind of strange, and I mean that as a compliment, not as an insult to the module itself or the writers. The basic setup is this: a modern organization tied to ancient Minoan mythology is trying to complete something called Project Prometheus. There's a lot of advanced technology involved: psychic control systems, hidden laboratories, mercenaries, Greek islands, intelligence agencies, and a literal Minotaur running around as one of the major villains. I know that sounds kind of insane, but it is. That's what it is all about. Because, this module commits to the bit completely. One thing I immediately liked is that it does not feel like the normal DC module, or not set in Gotham or whatever metropolis. It even doesn't really feel like a normal superhero adventure at times. It kind of, after reading it, feels closer to a spy thriller mixed with pulp, archaeology, and a comic book science fiction feely to it. It gives a different flavor from a lot of the early materials and the other modules I've been reading. The opening also sets the tone pretty fast. The heroes are at a football game in Central City when the lights suddenly fail, panic erupts, and a giant white eagle attacks the stadium. That's like classic 80s comic book storytelling right there. It's not subtle, it's not grounded, it's not even realistic in a sense for comic books. A giant eagle attacking a stadium during a blackout? Yeah, that's definitely the comic book energy there. And honestly, I think this module is strongest when you lean into the energy of stuff instead of trying to make it make sense or modernize it too hard. Now, structurally, the adventure is built almost like a flowchart, literally. The module includes a progression chart showing how encounters branch into each other depending on the player's choices. I kind of like that idea, especially for a module from 85, because a lot of the old adventures pretend players have freedom while secretly railroading you from room to room. I'm looking at a lot of those old TSR modules there. Project Prometheus at least attempts to react to player decisions and tries to predict ways they go. If they chase one lead, events kind of shift. If they ignore something, the timeline just keeps moving. And to me, that matters. The module even has a detailed timeline broken down by the exact hours and days. That kind of feels ahead of its time when it comes to that. There is urgency here, movement, escalation. The villains are doing things whether the heroes care or interfere or not. I always like that in the superhero gaming because it makes the world kind of feel alive, like it's working around you and not just reacting to you. One thing that surprised me rereading this module is how it's investigation heavy it actually kind of turns out to be. And I like investigation modules, so this is a bonus for me. There are entire sections devoted to gathering information from intelligence agencies, museums, universities, police, newspapers, all that kind of source stuff. This is not just a combat adventure, so you may want to let your group know that. If they're into that, just going in for a 4-color punch adventure, you're not gonna see that today. And honestly, I think a lot of groups in the 1980s probably played it wrong. I can easily imagine tables just rushing into fights and skipping half the investigation material, but honestly, the investigation is where the atmosphere really starts to work in this module. Because slowly, the players realize that something is bigger than a one-villain plot. There's an ancient history tied to it, missing technology, mind control. You got political manipulation, secret facilities. The conspiracy just keeps going wider and wider. And that part actually holds up really well. Now, the villains themselves are interesting because they are widely diverse. You have a whole bunch of things going on here with the villains, and the one that really stood out was the Minotaur himself, who exactly what you think he is, a giant brutal monster with serious physical power. So you have a whole lot going on here when it comes to that. The villains themselves give a good combination when it comes to this module's weird identity, half mythology, half super science, and somehow it mostly works. Mostly. Because here's where the age starts showing. The module could become extremely dense. There are moments where important information is buried inside giant paragraphs. NPC motivations sometimes get explained long before they even matter. Certain transitions between encounters feel kind of abrupt to me. You can tell that Mayfair was still learning how to organize at the time, and they really were just getting their footing. And some encounters also feel very comic book convenient, and I'm doing that in quotes. You can't see my hands, I know. So the heroes arrive exactly when they need to. The villains escape exactly when the story needs them to. Intel just shows up at convenient times. Yeah, that is old school comic book structure more than modern adventure design, and that's fine. Personally, I can forgive that because the module has personality. I'd rather run a flawed adventure with personality than a perfectly balanced adventure that just feels dead at the table. And Project Prometheus absolutely has personality. The chase scenes especially stood out to me. There is an entire section devoted to aerial pursuit mechanics involving the White Eagle and Cyclops aircraft. Again, this is a very comic-y book type adventure. Huge air battles over the Mediterranean, experimental vehicles, superheroes leaping between aircrafts. You know the thing. All those explosions over the ocean. This thing sweeps big, and honestly, I think if you ran this today using DC Heroes 3rd Edition rules, it would still work surprisingly well with only some minor adjustments. You would need to mostly clean up the presentation. That is really the biggest issue here. The ideas are very strong. The execution is just a little bit messy at times. I would probably modernize, obviously, the communications technology a little. Tighten the encounter transitions a little bit too. Let's see. Give the villains more reactive behavior. Expand the subplot potential for heroes. But I would not fundamentally change the adventure itself because the core idea still feels fun and interesting. And maybe that is the biggest compliment I can give to a 1985 superhero module. It still feels very playable. Not every old module survives that test, to be honest. Some feel like, museum pieces or should be just put on the shelf for display. But this one, Project Prometheus, still feels like something you can actually put and use at the table and have fun. Especially if your group likes investigation, international settings, and that whole comic booky weirdness from the Bronze Age. Mythology mixed with science fiction is a lot of fun, I'm not going to lie. And villains who feel larger than life, one thing I think this module really nails is the escalation as well. The story starts with confusion and a lot of chaos. Then it kind of widens itself into conspiracy, then international pursuit, then hidden installations, then ancient technology. Then it's full of the good comic book supervillain madness. The escalation curve kind of feels good. It keeps revealing larger layers without completely losing focus. And honestly, that Minotaur still works. I just like that Minotaur. It's kind of fun. It sounds ridiculous out loud, but there is something very DC Comics about a talking ancient mythological monster and dropping them into a techno conspiracy thriller type adventure. That is just comic books. That is the medium, and I think sometimes modern superheroes forget how weird comics can get or allowed to be, and how much fun they are when they do get to that. I would say this module never forgets that. Now, there's something else I kind of also appreciate here, maybe more now than I would have 10 years ago or so, is the sheer ambition of this thing. This module is only around I think about 20 something pages or so, or let me look. Looks like it clocks in at about 35. I mean, some people will say that's enough space. Some people say it's not enough space. I don't know. It does put a lot of amount of adventure into those pages. You have the public disaster at the stadium, the aerial pursuit scenes, investigation mechanics, yada, yada, yada. Stuff like that. So there is a lot packed into this module. Honestly, in some places, a little too much. You can feel the module kind of straining under its own ideas sometimes. Certain encounters move very quickly because there was just not a lot of time to develop certain things, it looked like. I don't know. I think a modern version of this would probably be a full campaign book instead of a short module. But weirdly, that compressed feeling also gives the momentum for this module. Module really, it rarely stalls. I mean, there's always something happening or something going on, and that keeps the energy pretty high. One encounter I really did kind of like after rereading was the blackout situation in Central City, because it immediately creates superhero problems beyond just solving it with a simple punch. You're dealing with panic, falling debris, crowds, confusion, and maybe some type of sabotage. I mean, that's very good Bronze Age superhero design. A lot weaker adventures reduce superheroes into like armed fist fighters, but comics constantly throw heroes in situations where saving people matters more than beating somebody unconscious. And I think this module really understands that, and I think the module becomes much stronger if the game master emphasizes civilian danger constantly. Do not make the stadium blackout feel like background flavor. It is the chaos. Children separated from parents, people tramping all over each other. I mean, just chaos. Emergency lights falling. You know, when you see those in the movies, boom, static, and all, electricity flying through the air, rumors spreading through the crowd, police not really wanting to communicate. Then that white eagle overhead attacks. It feels larger than life, and this is where this really does shine, and that's why I keep talking about it. It is just, I like it. I like it a lot. The investigation in this module is something I also like, because it is like a basic toolkit for gathering information. You can use it in different places in this module, and as well as different adventures. I do think modern GMs that don't run older games should take a read of this module and get an idea of how the investigation really works when it comes to investigation games. It has a lot of information for you in there, and I think you really will get something from it. This module has a lot going on, and I kind of like that, and it's actually a good module to run if you're into this type of thing, where investigation first, fist fighting later on. So when you grab this module, I would suggest reading it over a couple times to get everything down packed. Maybe definitely read the descriptors and everything like that, the information gathering section over a couple times. Try to condense it a little bit so it's not so information-y, and your group will understand it. Try to remember that some of the information is given in places that it shouldn't be given, and you should probably hold off on some information, but overall, it's a solid module, and I thanks for the suggestion, Dale. I appreciate the wanting to hear about this module. I had fun reading this again. I had it on my shelf again. I have a whole bunch of modules on my shelf, and sometimes I just don't read them or anything like that. So that's the goal of this podcast, is to go over things, read them, and try to break it down and see how it would actually work when it comes to the podcast and playing it at the table for modern day. Because remember, it's 2026 at this point, and we're looking at something from the 80s. So Not a lot of people are going to be doing that. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, DC Heroes is an '80s, '90s game." Oh, no, it's a great game. It still runs pretty smooth, and I know a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people online that literally at this point know the chart so well that they've actually memorized it, and they know when you roll the 2d10, they know if you hit or miss right away and how much damage you're going to do. I know a lot of people look at that chart and be like, "Oh, charts, I gotta cross-reference it." Yeah, okay, so the first couple of times when you start doing it, it's going to be a little bit of a, check the chart, check the other chart, things like that. But once you start playing the game, you're going to see how smooth the game actually runs when it comes to superhero battles and everything. Sure, you'll be checking that table chart for a little while, but then eventually you're just going to be like second nature to you, and it becomes no big deal. Anyway, I'm going to head out. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Keep it original, keep it old school. Don't forget to comment, rate, and follow wherever you can. Thanks, everybody. Good night.